the Rugby World Cup. Let's start with the biggest one of them all, the Rugby World Cup. If there's one tournament that every rugby-playing nation dreams about, it's this one. It only comes around every 4 years, but the impact it leaves is massive. The first official Rugby World Cup was held in 1987, co-hosted by New Zealand and Australia. Before that, there was no global tournament to bring together all the top teams. Rugby had been played internationally for over a century, but it wasn't until '87 that the sport had its own proper World Cup, much like football did decades earlier. The format has evolved, but the core idea is simple. 20 teams divided into 4 pools of 5. The top 2 from each pool move on to the knockout stages, quarterfinals, semifinals, and then the final. Every single match carries weight, and one mistake can send even the best teams home early. What makes the World Cup special is not just the quality of rugby, but the pressure. This is the one stage where Tier 1 nations like New Zealand, South Africa, England, France and Australia expect to go deep, but it's also where Tier 2 nations like Japan, Fiji or Uruguay get a rare chance to shake the world. Remember 2015? Japan beating South Africa wasn't just an upset, it was a shift. That moment changed how people looked at so-called underdogs. Then you've got historic performances like Johnny Wilkinson's drop goal in 2003 to give England their first title, or New Zealand's back-to-back wins in 2011 and 2015. South Africa's 2019 triumph was more than a rugby story, it was a symbol of unity and power. Winning the Rugby World Cup is the highest honour in the sport. You don't just win a trophy, you become part of rugby history. Now, while the World Cup is the top prize, every year we still get to enjoy major tournaments, and when it comes to annual drama, nothing beats the Six Nations. Six Nations, Europe's fiercest rivalry. The Six Nations is the heartbeat of European rugby. It's old, it's intense, and it's deeply rooted in national pride. The origins go all the way back to 1883 when it started as the Home Nations Championship between England, Ireland, Scotland and Wales. France joined in 1910 and Italy came in 2000, turning it into the Six Nations we know today. Unlike the World Cup, this tournament happens every single year, usually between February and March. Each team plays the others once. That's 5 matches per team. Win all your games and you get the Grand Slam. Beat all the other British Isles nations, if you're England, Ireland, Scotland or Wales, and you get the Triple Crown. It's layered with mini rivalries that make every fixture count. There's no neutral ground. All matches are home or away, and that makes a difference. Playing France in Paris is a totally different beast from playing them in Twickenham. Italy may not be the favourites most years, but they've even produced iconic moments like their win against Wales in 2022, ending a 36-match losing streak. This tournament isn't just about titles, it's about history and bragging rights. When England plays Scotland, it's not just a game, it's the Calcutta Cup. When Ireland plays France, you're watching 2 of the best tactical minds in the game go head-to-head. And when Wales play anyone at home, the atmosphere at the Principality Stadium is unmatched. The Six Nations is brutal, it's emotional, and it's the closest thing to a European Championship in rugby union. But Europe doesn't have a monopoly on fierce rivalries. If you shift focus to the Southern Hemisphere, there's another tournament that brings the giants together, the Rugby Championship. The Rugby Championship. If the Six Nations is Europe's crown jewel, then the Rugby Championship is the Southern Hemisphere's ultimate battlefield. This is where New Zealand, South Africa, Australia and Argentina go head-to-head every year in a competition that's all about intensity and world-class rugby. It started in 1996 as the Tri-Nations, just New Zealand, Australia and South Africa. Argentina joined in 2012, turning it into the Rugby Championship. That inclusion brought more balance and variety and gave South American rugby a consistent spotlight at the top level. Each team plays the others home and away depending on the year's format. These matches are more than just test fixtures. They're clashes between former and current world champions. Every single team in this tournament has made it to a World Cup semi-final, and 3 of them have lifted the trophy. The skill level is elite, the pace is different, and the physicality relentless. New Zealand's dominance is well known. They've won more titles than anyone, but South Africa always brings power and structure. Australia brings flair and unpredictability. Argentina brings passion and tactical edge. This tournament doesn't have the historical layers of the Six Nations, but in terms of raw quality, it's right there at the top. One of the subplots that runs parallel is the Bledisloe Cup, contested between New Zealand and Australia. It's technically its own series, but it's often played as part of the Rugby Championship. For those 2 nations, it's a matter of pride, especially since Australia has found it hard to reclaim that cup in recent years. The Rugby Championship is intense, fast and global. But if you want to see rugby taken to its most explosive and crowd-friendly format, then we need to talk about Sevens. Sevens, World Series and Olympics. Rugby Sevens is a different beast. It's still rugby, but stripped down. 7 players per team, 7-minute halves, full-size pitch. That means more space, more running, and a lot more points in a shorter time. It's the format that brings the party to rugby. The Sevens World Series is a global circuit that takes place annually. It includes stops in places like Dubai, Cape Town, Sydney, Vancouver, Los Angeles, and the iconic Hong Kong Sevens. Each tournament lasts a weekend and teams accumulate points across the season to crown a series champion. The atmosphere is electric. Sevens tournaments are festivals, music, costumes, fans from all over the world, and non-stop action. You get dozens of matches in a day, and because it's so fast-paced, upsets happen more often. Smaller nations like Kenya, Samoa or Portugal can stun the heavyweights. In 2016, Rugby Sevens made its Olympic debut in Rio. That changed everything. Suddenly players had a shot at an Olympic medal. Fiji won the men's gold in 2016 and again in 2020. And it wasn't just a sporting achievement, it was a national moment. For countries like Fiji and New Zealand, Sevens is more than a stepping stone, it's a tradition. The women's game in Sevens has also grown rapidly. Teams like New Zealand, Australia and France have raised the bar, while emerging nations like Brazil and Ireland are pushing through. The women's circuit runs alongside the men's, and the quality is just as high. Sevens is high speed, high stakes, and completely different in rhythm and strategy compared to the traditional 15s. It's also a great entry point for new fans, easy to follow, full of action, and global in every sense. But if Sevens gives you the festival, then club rugby is where the foundations are built, week in, week out. Let's move on to the tournaments where most of these players earn their stripes. The domestic and club competitions, club tournaments. Once you step away from the international spotlight, you get to the real engine room of the sport, club rugby. This is where most players spend the majority of their careers, and it's where consistency, depth, and week-to-week form truly matter. While international rugby gives you the prestige, club rugby is where players build their legacy. In Europe, the biggest and most prestigious club tournament is the Heineken Champions Cup. This isn't just a domestic affair. It brings together the top teams from 3 of the strongest leagues in the world: England's Gallagher Premiership, France's top 14, and the United Rugby Championship, which includes clubs from Ireland, Scotland, Wales, Italy, and more recently, South Africa. The Champions Cup has knockout drama, high stakes, and elite matchups between teams with completely different playing styles. You'll see the tactical discipline of the Irish provinces go up against the raw power of the French, or the structured English sides battle it out with the flair and speed of the South Africans. It's as close as club rugby gets to a continental championship. Below the Champions Cup is the European Challenge Cup, the second-tier tournament that still features high-quality rugby. It's a proving ground for up-and-coming clubs or those just outside the top tier. Many teams use this competition to build squad depth, give young players exposure, and even make a run at European silverware. Each domestic league also has its own rhythm and intensity. The Gallagher Premiership in England is known for its physicality and set-piece battles. The top 14 in France is not only one of the most competitive leagues, but it's also the wealthiest, with massive clubs like Toulouse and Racing 92 attracting top-tier international players. Then you have the United Rugby Championship, which has become more diverse and intense since the inclusion of South African franchises like the Stormers and Bulls. Irish clubs like Leinster and Munster have dominated historically, but now there's real balance across regions. In the Southern Hemisphere, the equivalent has always been Super Rugby. While the format has changed repeatedly over the years, the original idea was to pit the best club teams from New Zealand, Australia and South Africa against each other. It later expanded to include teams from Argentina and Japan, and now features new additions like Moana Pacifica and Fijian Drua. Even with its changes, Super Rugby has remained one of the best showcases of raw, fast-paced rugby. New Zealand clubs like the Crusaders and Blues consistently set the standard, while the Brumbies and Waratahs bring Australia's best. Super Rugby is faster and more open than many of the Northern Hemisphere leagues, with a strong emphasis on attacking play and ball movement. All these club competitions, whether domestic or cross-continental, are what feed the national teams. They're where players get tested regularly, where tactical systems are developed, and where fans build lifelong allegiances. But rugby's growth doesn't stop with the professional men's game. If you want to see where the momentum is building, you have to look at women's rugby. And that's where things are changing rapidly. Women's rugby tournaments. Women's rugby has gone through a remarkable transformation in the past 2 decades. What started as a largely amateur game with limited coverage is now on the path to full professionalism, with global tournaments, packed stadiums, and a level of competition that continues to rise year after year. At the top of the women's game is the Rugby World Cup, which began in 1991. The most recent edition, originally scheduled for 2021 but played in 2022 due to the pandemic, was hosted by New Zealand, and it felt like a breakthrough moment. Not only were the matches broadcast to a global audience, but the final between New Zealand and England took place in a sold-out Eden Park, the largest stadium in the country. That tournament wasn't just a showcase of talent, it was a clear statement that women's rugby had finally earned its place on the biggest stage. Alongside the World Cup, the Women's Six Nations has become the flagship annual competition in Europe. The format mirrors the men's version, with England, France, Ireland, Italy, Scotland and Wales competing. But what's changed in recent years is the level of investment and attention. England and France have taken the lead in professionalising their women's programmes. England's Red Roses have dominated the competition in recent years, thanks to their full-time contracts and structured player development. But the gap is closing, and other nations are starting to put resources behind their teams as well. Outside of the 15-a-side format, Women's Sevens has been a huge growth area. The Women's Sevens World Series runs parallel to the men's, with stops in major cities around the world. Countries like New Zealand and Australia have built dominant Sevens programs, but there's been real progress from teams like France, Canada and Fiji. The inclusion of Sevens in the Olympics has made a massive difference. Since 2016, Rugby Sevens has become a global Olympic sport, and that visibility has helped grow interest in countries where rugby wasn't traditionally strong. Off the pitch, professionalism is starting to catch up. Leagues like England's Premier 15s and France's Elite 1 are building strong foundations for player development. More players are being paid, more matches are being televised, and more young girls are entering the game. Women's rugby is no longer an afterthought. It's become a core part of the sport's future. But to build a truly global game, it's not just about top-level competitions. Growth depends on what's happening in the youth ranks and in emerging rugby nations. That's where we're heading next. Youth, regional and emerging nations competitions. Every elite player had to start somewhere, and for most, that journey began in youth tournaments or regional competitions that often go under the radar. These tournaments aren't as flashy as the World Cup or the Six Nations, but they're crucial to the health of global rugby. The most important youth competition is the World Rugby U20 Championship. It's the proving ground for the next generation of stars. Every year, the top U20 teams from around the world compete in a high-intensity tournament that mirrors the structure of the Senior World Cup. Countries like New Zealand, England, South Africa and France take this competition seriously, and the talent on display is usually just a few years away from making senior international appearances. There's also the U20 Trophy, which acts as a second-tier tournament and gives developing nations a platform to compete and possibly earn promotion. Beyond youth rugby, there are regional tournaments that give Tier 2 and Tier 3 nations regular competitive fixtures. In the Pacific Nations Cup is a key tournament. It features teams like Fiji, Samoa, Tonga, and sometimes Japan. These countries produce world-class players, but they don't always get the same regular test-level opportunities. So this tournament is vital for development and visibility. In Africa, the Rugby Africa Cup provides a similar function. It includes teams like Namibia, Kenya, and Uganda, all working to raise their standard and push for World Cup qualification. The Americas have their own version in the form of the Americas Rugby Championship. It's an important competition for teams like Uruguay, Chile, Brazil, the USA and Canada, countries with growing domestic programs and improving infrastructure. There are similar setups in Asia and Europe. The Asia Rugby Championship features countries like Hong Kong, South Korea and Malaysia. In Europe, there's the Rugby Europe Championship, which acts as a second tier beneath the Six Nations. Teams like Georgia, Romania, Portugal and Spain compete here, and some have made it to the World Cup through strong performances in qualifiers, and those qualifiers themselves for the Rugby World Cup are intense. For many nations, just qualifying is the goal. It means funding, visibility, and a chance to play on the biggest stage. Chile's qualification for the 2023 Rugby World Cup was historic. So was Portugal's return. These aren't just rugby results, they're national achievements. All of these tournaments at youth and regional levels are helping rugby grow beyond its traditional borders, but to tie it all together, the sport needs structure, and that's where the push for a global calendar comes into play. So now you've seen the full picture, from the global glory of the Rugby World Cup to the fierce regional pride of the Six Nations and Rugby Championship, from the lightning-fast chaos of sevens to the week-in, week-out battles of club rugby. You've seen how the women's game is surging forward, how youth and regional competitions are laying the foundations, and how rugby is slowly aligning itself for a more global, connected future. Every tournament plays a different role. Some build legends, some build nations, some just give you the kind of raw, emotional rugby that makes you fall in love with the game all over again. Which of these tournaments is your favorite to watch? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you, and don't forget to subscribe.